Welcome back to the Birdhouse Dynasty show, and tonight we're going to look into some roster construction. But before that, I just want to thank you all out there for watching, and if you haven't already, go ahead and smash that like button, and if you haven't subscribed, go ahead and hit that subscribe button to get all the fantastic content we've got coming your way. We do have the NFL draft coming next Thursday night. We're going to do a live show for you in the Birdhouse. Really looking forward to it. So, when we dive into roster construction, you may have heard me talk about a 12-team Superflex tight end premium start 10 league, or maybe 16-team start 9, or a best ball 12-team start 12 league. And what you might be asking, does that actually mean? All right. Well, when I'm saying start 10, say, that's not counting kickers or defenses. In Dynasty, you don't really get much value out of the kickers and defenses. So, or at least, especially in trying to trade them, there really is no value. So we don't count kickers or defenses. If your league still has kickers in it, I highly advise going against it. I don't mind defenses so much. It does add a little randomness to it, and some leagues have them, some leagues don't. Doesn't bother me one way or the other, honestly. But back to the start 10. So when we say start 10, we're counting just the quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, and any flexes, whether they're super flex or regular flexes. That's how many starters you have. Okay, so the most common league out there probably is 12-team start 10. So I'm going to try and generalize off of that type of league, but I'll mention the others as well as we go along. Now, what I do want to mention is you can go to dynastydaddy.com and check out where your team stands in your particular league. Dynasty Daddy does a great job of breaking down the teams and showing you whether you're a contender or you're frisky or you're a fraud, or even if it recommends you to just go ahead and start rebuilding. Maybe you're in the process of rebuilding and it'll say trust the process. But either way, Dynasty Daddy is free and I look at it all the time. It also has some very good tools in there, like a warp tool. We can get into what that means later on. But that's basically wins over replacement. You may have heard of WAR in baseball terms, and it's basically the same thing, just in football terms, showing which positions matter more than others in your particular league and scoring system within that league format. So you want to take a look at that. That kind of gives you a baseline as to where you stand in the league and whether you can go for it right now or you need to start rebuilding maybe. So when we're talking a 12-team Superflex tight end premium, roster construction is of the utmost importance because you don't want to be wasting those spots on the bottom of your bench on players that really may not end up helping you at all. Sometimes you have, some feeling for a guy, a wide receiver. Let's say I'll just throw out a Xavier Hutchinson, for instance, right? He got into a decent offense last season in Houston, a flashy new quarterback, and but how much did he actually score for you? Was he even startable? All right, so that's what I want to get into here. Maybe help you eliminate some of the riffraff on the bottom of your roster and get into proper roster construction. So in Superflex leagues, it's generally considered that the quarterback is definitely the most important position. They score the most points in most scoring formats for you. And so you want to have a quarterback in your Superflex position at all times if possible, right? Even the bottom end quarterbacks like Geno Smith and down Derek Carr, those types, they outscore most of the receivers or running backs that could be inserted into the Superflex position, right? So that's why you want to be starting quarterbacks in that Superflex position at all times. So how many quarterbacks do you need? Well, first we want to actually start out with the wide receiver position, because the wide receiver position generally should account for 5 of your starting lineup positions in a start 10 league, right? So you have your 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 or 3 starting wide receivers, then 2 flexes, and the super flex and tight end position, right? Well, those 2 or 3 flex spots, I generally want to be starting wide receivers at those positions. Now, the reason being is that you can generally just trust wide receivers more so than running backs for consistency as well as longevity. So there's a couple of reasons to want to have good wide receivers in your starting flex positions. Now, how many wide receivers do we want to own? Well, that's where it gets tricky. You see, you don't want to flood your bench too much with these random wide receivers or these Quez Watkins type guys that you don't know when they're going to blow up. I mean, Quez Watkins probably had 2 weeks last season that you could have maybe gotten 10 points out of them, right? Or maybe you're thinking MVS was a good stash on the bottom of your bench because he was with the Chiefs, and yeah, every other week he gets opportunity, but how many weeks would he have really been startable for you, right? So what we want to talk about at the wide receiver position is a threshold. And what I'm talking about with a threshold type wide receiver is somebody that fits into the starting element. And what I mean by that is you want to take the required amount of starters at wide receiver, let's say it's 3, multiply it by the amount of teams in the league, that's 12. So you're at 36, right? So there's 36 wide receivers that should be startable for all teams in the league. Then to figure out the flex, the number of flexes that you should have for your wide receivers, you want to take the amount of flex positions, multiply that by the number of teams, and then divide it by half, because you could start running backs in there as well. Maybe a tight end here and there. So if you take the amount of flexes, that would be 2 times 12, that's 24, and then divide that in half, you have 12. So we have the 36 that we started with and 12. Add that together, you come up with 48. 48 wide receivers are the amount of wide receivers that are at least threshold wide receivers in that type of format, a 12-team Superflex tight end premium start 10. So we have 48 wide receivers to attain that you want to be able to start in your league. Anything below that is below the threshold. The types that I talked about, the Xavier Hutchinsons, Quez Watkins, MVS style, Jake Bobo's, those type of guys, though they may have potential to eventually become something at some point, more often than not, they are not going to become that. What you're hoping for is something that is just not attainable for most of them. Yes, by doing this, you may miss out on a Puka Nacua here and there. Maybe Tank Dell even wouldn't qualify for that, but trust me, over the long run, you're going to hit more often than not by doing this style of a format for your wide receivers. Now, what you want to do then when you're in your startup is make sure that you draft nothing but wide receivers within that threshold, all right? And ultimately, get a lineup, or a roster, that has at least the 5 starting wide receivers, plus maybe 1 or 2 wide receivers that also fit into that threshold. So last year, for instance, in my Turtle League, which was this format, I had 5 starting wide receivers, plus I also had Jacoby Myers and Curtis Samuel on my bench. Okay, both fit just within that threshold, and they were very helpful to my team, which ended up winning the league, and it really won the league based off of roster construction, because I will get into how I handled the quarterback situation in that league in a little bit. But I just want to finish with the wide receivers because it is super important. Again, we said it was 48, so in this league, basically you can just take the top 50 wide receivers, and you want to make sure that you are rostering nothing but top 50 wide receivers. You don't want to drop that threshold down to 65 or 75 and then end up with like 9 or 10 wide receivers, because that takes away from the depth at the other positions that can help you over the course of the season. Now, the reason for that is, so if you're in that league in particular, we can roster 24 players, excuse me, 24 players plus 4 taxi squad. So that brings us to 28. We also have 5 IR spots, which you could also have players on, obviously, as needed. So we'll stick with the 28, right? So we have 24 plus 4 taxi, 7 wide receivers. That leaves us with 21 other roster spots available. Now, how many quarterbacks do we want? Well, quarterbacks are the most important scoring position, right? Individually. So what I try to do is get 2 elite quarterbacks if possible. I usually use at least 2 out of my first 3 picks in dynasty drafts on quarterbacks. Now, if I can, I'll even trade up into the first round so I can get 2 super elite quarterbacks, but sometimes that's not possible or the value isn't there. So I'm not able to do that, but that's okay. I'm fine with having a Dak or even a Jared Goff as my second quarterback. Now, if you happen to be in a position where the value doesn't make sense, you may want to go another route where you have 1 elite quarterback and then you have, say, 2 or 3 other middling quarterbacks. It's fine if you go the route of having, say, Kirk Cousins, Matt Stafford, and Geno Smith. But if I'm rotating like that, I like to have at least 2, maybe 3 guys like that. Sam Howell was a decent guy to find last year in startups. That was, like my 4th quarterback in some leagues, and he paid off. As ugly as he looked, he actually paid off fantasy-wise. Now, with the quarterback position, you want to be flexible. You want to, and this again goes into why we don't want to roster too many wide receivers, because as we saw last season, there were a ton of injuries at the quarterback positions, right? So we want to have those bottom spots on our rosters available to be very fluid. We want to have 2 or 3 spots on the bottom of the roster that we can continuously just churn over as the season progresses, right? Even if you don't own the main quarterback, you still want to be picking up other possible starts from the quarterback position. Guys like Joe Flacco last season, he paid off huge. How many leagues were you in where Flacco ended up starting for one of the teams in your championship game? Heck, in that Turtle League, I had Easton Stick starting, and then I had to debate between Sam Howell and CJ Beathard as my other starter. I went with Howell, but actually I would have been better off with Beathard. He would have got me 4 more points, but I still found a way to win anyway, and that was because of the strength of my wide receiver position. So we go with 3 or 4 quarterbacks to start with, right? So we've got 3 or 4 quarterbacks, about 7 wide receivers. So if we say 4 quarterbacks, we're 11 deep into our 28-man roster, right? Now we're leaving running back for last. Now we go to the tight end position. Now this is important at tight end. You don't want to be rostering too many of these guys. Whether you decide to go with a high-end tight end, that's fine, and just have 1 backup. Or you go with a middling tight end that you don't grab till, say, round 10, 11, or 12. Maybe you're able to get like an Evan Ingram last season. David Njoku also paid off well. But you don't need to win with even those guys. You could have had Dallas Goedert in 1 last year. All right. What I'm getting at is the importance of not rostering too many tight ends. Those tight ends 3, 4, 5. I see guys with Darnell Washington on their team still. I mean, I probably still have him stashed away on a taxi squad as well. But I can guarantee you he is on the cut down list. Now, with rookie drafts coming up, this is of utmost importance to know who we need to cut and who we need to keep. Most importantly, which positions those guys are at. I know you like to draft for talent and you see all these talented wide receivers. Well, there's 100 talented wide receivers in the NFL. That's how they made the NFL. They had to have some talent, right? But when it comes down to it, we need points. And how do we get those points? It's by having the guys that can play at the right time. And when we get to the running back position, this is what I'm talking about. So if we had 7 wide receivers, 4 quarterbacks, and 2 tight ends, that puts us at 13. That leaves us with the room to roster up to 15 running backs. And why is this important? Because when you're building your wide receiver room up so heavily, you are basically almost going to a 0 running back or maybe a hero running back type strategy that many of us know from our redraft days, right? That's been a strategy for years now in redraft, and I hold true to it. It doesn't always work out in redraft as well, but in Dynasty it can work out better because of the ability to be more fluid and trade draft picks. And also what you need to do is stay very active on the waiver wire in this type of style. What you do is, if you have room for up to 15 running backs, you want to roster any running back on a 53-man roster. That means the 3rd, even 4th running back on some teams. Why is that, you ask? Well, the reason being is the running back position, you can predict more easily points being scored from them when they are given the opportunity to start for their particular team. So when you have injuries, and running backs obviously have the most injuries of any of these positions, you want to create your own good luck. Yes, luck is definitely involved in fantasy football. We all know that. But there are certain ways to create good luck for yourselves. And by having backup running backs, that helps create good luck for you. You can sit there and complain about injuries all you want. I'm not going to feel sorry for you. You need to prepare for it. These guys are playing football. One thing I can guarantee you is they're going to get injured. It happens. Every season after every season, guys get hurt. So why are people complaining that their guy got hurt and using that as an excuse as to why they lost? Well, in certain situations, if you didn't properly roster construct, then you're not going to have a backup plan for it. Now, if you have tons of running backs on there, at some point, they're going to get starts. I mean, there were less than 10 running backs last year who started all 17 games for their teams, right? At least of the top 25 running backs. So, again, the running backs are going to get injured, so have backups. Have the Ezekiel Elliott's on your roster. Have the Alexander Madisons. Because you know when they start, they're at least going to get you 7 or 8 points. And if you have all your eggs in the wide receiver basket, getting you as the strongest part of your roster, they're going to make up the majority of your points and make up for the fact that maybe your 2 running backs in a given week only score maybe 15 to 20 points for you. Now, if you get lucky, again, good luck happens when you prepare yourself for it. I had Ezekiel Elliott on that Turtle League team, right? So late in the season, Ramondre Stevenson went down, and boom, Zeke slid into getting the entire volume for the Patriots. Now, as bad as they were last year, they still fed Zeke the rock. And he had multiple 20-point games for me in the postseason. So that's what I'm getting at, is it ultimately can come from anywhere. I had a team 3 years ago that I won the championship with Damian Williams and Dante Foreman starting for me. I started Justin Jackson in the semifinals, all right? So it is absolutely possible to win with these guys at running back. Okay, CMC got hurt in the middle of the championship week, so he let down a lot of people in that championship week. And there is nothing you can do about that. That you could count as bad luck, all right? But in one of my teams that I had CMC, I didn't lose just because of him. I lost because Kelsey had a bad week. A.J. Brown had a bad week as well. And the guy I was playing against was a good opponent. And he had a couple of guys do better than what they were average. He didn't have an amazing week, but he still beat me by about 10 points. And I can directly lay that on CMC, Kelsey, and A.J. Brown underperforming in that particular week. So, yes, can't win them all, right? But you can prepare yourself to do well and have some good luck go your way. Now, main reason I was getting at it once again is because we're in rookie season, and so you want to make proper adjustments to your roster, get yourself situated so that you can have a solid season, not let bad luck bite you in the toe. So, before I finish, there's a couple of things that I wanted to make sure that you understand. First of all, understand whether you're contending or rebuilding, because if you are rebuilding, you don't need this roster construction. You don't want all of those running backs scoring points for you when their guy ahead of them gets injured. So that whatever running backs you may have if you're rebuilding, honestly, when I'm rebuilding, I only have 2 or 3 running backs on my roster. And when they get their opportunity, I'm trying to trade them away right away, okay? And that's also a good point. Even if you're contending and you've got a dozen running backs on your roster and one of these backups gets their opportunity, but you already have a couple of starters set in stone, get rid of those guys. There's no reason to hang on to them. Let somebody else get those points, okay? Unless it's your opponent that you're going against in the particular week. But their time to score points is limited. It may only be 1 or 2 games. Maybe the guy ahead of him got a high ankle sprain, so it might be a month where he gets some starts. But the main thing is that he has increased value, and that's your opportunity to try and jump up and get a second or third for them. All right. Also, make sure you know whether you're contending or rebuilding. Some people are more in the middle of the pack, and if your league is 4 or 5 years in, then you have sort of a division. You might have 3, 4, or 5 top-end teams, and if you're stuck in the middle, you don't want to go through another season where you're just going 8-8, maybe squeaking into the playoffs, and then losing right away. Okay, yes, it's important. I know you can just squeak into the playoffs and win. I did do that in this Turtle League, but that was the first year of existence. Okay, when a league is in its first year of existence, there's, in a 12-team league, there's 9, 10, 11 teams that are contending from the get-go. Usually there's only 1 or 2 squads that, out of the startup draft, decide to do the productive struggle or rebuild right away, where they just go for future firsts. All right, that's a fun way to do Dynasty, but it's not for everyone, okay? So make sure that you understand where you sit in your league and then go get the proper roster construction done, and let's have some success. As always, I want to remind you to hit the like, subscribe, and never stop working.